Good morning, Luke.
Good morning. How are you?
Okay, how are you?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Not too bad. So, uh, trucking on, as they say. Oh,
Mm.
so
Yeah, I was over in Spain last week. It was last weekend, wasn't it? Not this weekend gone, the weekend before.
yeah. Well, at least you got back before they imposed a
Yeah,
quarantine.
yes, just missed that one. But they've still got spikes going on all over the place, and that's with them wearing masks outdoors up continually.
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge is going to be. I know from conversations I've had with people this week that there's also quite a few areas of the UK that are still on this watch list I alluded to
Mm.
last time I gave an update. And I think the challenge is going to be as soon as obviously everybody's now rushed to book holidays, both staycations and also sort of overseas holidays. And I think it's basically going to be one to watch as people start to come back.
Mm.
And I know there are a few areas that are doing some rather interesting stuff to kind of keep themselves off the government's hit list, if that makes sense.
Sounds is it legitimate?
Well, you've only got to look at it. There was a BA, I think it was a BA, but there was a flight that landed in Barbados from the UK. So I'm just going to move you onto the same screen as a webcam. And there were two people who tested positive for COVID, but it's now turned into 9 people. And the Barbados government is now reconsidering the air bridge between the UK as a result.
Yeah.
But at the same time, offering year-long staycations for people who want to go live in Barbados and work remotely. As long as you can prove you have a job, as long as you can prove you've got medical insurance and all that kind of stuff, they're basically giving away year-long tourist visas at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Oh well. Yeah. No, it's definitely strange times.
Yeah. So
I just thought of something then, but I've forgotten it now. But yeah, over in Spain, I mean, they've got it fairly clamped down, as it were. The only problem is over there, I think they all like to kiss each other and hug each other, and as soon as one gets it, that's it.
well, this is it. But I think equally so. You even look at the strict countries elsewhere that have enforced masks in public places are still keeping to 2-meter social distancing, not 1. They're still having second spikes and recurrences of hotspots. And let's be perfectly honest, we went to a 1-meter social distancing so the kids could go to school. And let's be fair, so the hospitality industry could reopen because it was never reopened with a 2-meter social distancing rule. Let's be perfectly and honest about that.
Yeah, that was it. That's what I was going to say. When I got into Spain, the first thing they did is they took your form to say that where you're going and all the rest of it, and they took your temperature before you even got out of departures. Got back into Britain, they were checking on people that they'd actually filled in the form after telling people like 1 minute beforehand when they just got off a plane.
Wow.
Apart from that, they weren't taking any temperatures. They weren't, and no controls. So, as you a bit behind, I think.
Well, I think also it's slightly different because essentially we are, let's face it, a policing by consent country, whereas quite a few other places are not policing by consent. It's you will do it. You will do as we say, or else.
Yeah.
Interesting thing is now they're saying that anybody who goes to Spain, one, your travel insurance is now null and void because of the FCO recommendation, but two, you face £1,000 fine when you come back to the UK. Potentially, if you have COVID and you fail to follow the guidelines, basically, which is quite extreme. But then again, you can't really enforce it. Same as you can't really enforce for wearing a mask out in public or in hotels or in shops.
No.
And all the big retail brands have said we are not enforcing the wearing of masks because it's not our responsibility to enforce it. So if you want to come shopping in Tesco's without a mask, carry on.
Interesting.
It's a simple answer.
Mm.
So, I mean, our friends north of the border in Scotland, and I'm sure burial updaters may take a different approach, but
I think it's fair to say, Luke, there's there is a difference in people's reactions. Yes, we're hearing there's a little bit of debate here about what good the masks actually do and the rest of it, but overwhelmingly, I would say I think I saw it summed up in it was a frivolous Facebook post or Twitter post the other day that kind of drew attention to. From what we're seeing in the media, England, there seems to be quite heated debate about masks are a waste of time. You know, there's a lot of debate about we know better than the government's got it all wrong. Whereas the reaction in Scotland is, you want us to wear a mask? Oh, all right. There's not the same level of debate north of the border. It's very much, it's a more low-key reaction, and it's, you want us to wear a mask? Fair enough. Not a big deal. I don't particularly like wearing a mask when I'm going to do my shopping, but I don't object to it. And I would say there's a fairly high level of compliance north of the border. It's now become the exception to see somebody not wearing a mask in a supermarket than the other way around. Go back about 6 weeks, it was very much the other way around.
Yeah.
I adopted wearing a mask quite early on, just from a point of view of there's a reasonable argument that it's a sensible thing to do. So it's not a big deal, I'll wear a mask. I was the exception. Now the majority are doing it.
Yeah, and I think the key message about the mask is the mask will not stop you from catching coronavirus if you don't have it.
Yeah.
The mask will stop transmission of coronavirus from you if you have it.
Yeah.
Basically.
I think that's the big issue, isn't it? It's not for your safety; it's for everybody else's safety.
Exactly. And as example, I take the mindset, the viewpoint. If I'm going into Tesco's or Morrison's or whatever, I don't want to be responsible. If I happen to be an asymptomatic carrier, I don't show any symptoms. I haven't through this whole thing, but I don't want it on my conscience that I've asymptomatically passed it to someone else. If wearing a mask reduces that risk, then it's something I'm comfortable to do. Don't like it, but it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, I mean, I know one of the things they have said, the sort of clear plastic visors are absolutely of no use whatsoever. However, what is worrying, certainly down south, and a number of pubs and restaurants that I've been to, is a lot of the staff are actually opting to wear those with no face mask underneath. And I think that
blowing the stuff on the food.
Well, this is it exactly. Yeah, whoever just mentioned then. So I think the challenge and the message back is fine if you want to wear the sort of full length plastic visor, fine, but you need to be wearing the face mask as well. It's not an either or.
It's not an either or. Yeah. It's interesting.
I saw that in Spain as well. A lot of the restaurants have got their staff wearing those but they're visors which are literally just like that, around the mouth sort of thing. They're not even the ones that we've seen here with like that come downwards. But yeah, I don't see them being that sort of useful. Anyway, right, 10 o'clock. Welcome, everybody. We were just having a little chat about masks and things. I was over in Spain the other week. Got back before the quarantine was enforced, and I'm still all right, so I haven't brought anything back. But over there, yeah, they've got masks on as soon as you walk out the door. And if you go to the beach, you can only take the mask off when you sat down. So yeah, over there it's and they've still got spikes. So we've not lost COVID. It will keep us on our toes for a few more months. Hopefully not much more than that. But yes, in interesting times. A couple more people just joining us now. Yep. Just a point. I saw an article in LinkedIn the other day for anybody who does weddings and everything. It's there was a bit of a debate as to whether a wedding can be priced separately. Take on a wedding package is that at the end of the day you split it anyway, because you've got your food revenue, your beverage revenue, your room hire, whatever else you have. And I would suggest that you split your charges on the bill, as long as they come to the total you've agreed with the client as a package. Split it on the bill, and then there's no argument to say whether it should be a package or whether it should be a multiple taxed item, and that way you can benefit from the 5%. There's something there in the VAT regulations that talks about if it's a package that can't be separated out, then you've just got to charge for 20%. So helpful tip to bear in mind there when we finally get through to doing weddings, even if there are only 30 people. So first on the list today, we've got Andy Merrick, who's going to give us a little short comment on the new licensing laws that are coming out. You there, Andy?
Hi, Robin. Yes, hi, everybody. Yeah, so just really a summary of legislation that's gone through Parliament only last week, actually. Some temporary measures to help the hospitality industry with the social distancing and just trying to increase their capacity in outside areas, etc. So am I able to share my screen, Robin? Or
should be able to. I think I've worked out how to do it now.
Let me just see if I can do that. Then just bear with me 2 seconds.
Yep.
Okay, hopefully that's sharing.
Mm-hmm.
So just obviously a little bit about us. We're hospitality and leisure consultants. We do various things, and obviously licensing is is what we're going to be talking about today. We also help insolvency practitioners as well with trading insolvencies in hospitality and leisure and retail. So I'm trying to get my screen to move now.
Too far.
Sorry. Let's try and get it to go back. Right, there we go. Okay, so Business and Planning Act 2020 got royal assent from Parliament last week. It gives temporary off-sales extensions, a new pavement licence regime. Both of these things are valid, temporary measures valid until September 2021. The idea is obviously, as I said, to assist hospitality sector with obligations for social distancing, etc. So the off-sales extension, it permits off-sales to be made at a time when the licensed premises are open for the purpose of selling alcohol for consumption on the premises, subject to the cut-off time of 11 p.m. Or the closure time of an existing outside area if that is actually earlier. The measures also temporarily suspend the existing license conditions insofar as if they are inconsistent with the new off-sales permissions. So if you have conditions on your license already for off-sales, it might be that you can only serve off-sales in a sealed container. It might be that it can only be for delivery, or it might be that it's restricted to a certain area. Those conditions will be suspended. The thing to remember about that is that if you have had any conditions put on your license in the last 3 years that restrict the off-sales, then those conditions will not be suspended. So anything over 3 years old is the, and if you're not sure, then obviously you can either ask the licensing authority and they'll let you know. But if you don't have off sales at all on your license and it's just on sales, then you have now got an automatic off sales on your license until September next year. So the next one, so the dual license, we've pretty much gone through that one. If you've got off sales and on sales, it does let you do both, and deliveries to buildings used for residential or work purposes. So if you're doing deliveries, of course, you can also include alcohol in that. Temporary pavement license, local authorities, obviously it changes right across the country on how they deal with their pavement licenses. London, especially Westminster, City of London, are particularly, or have been particularly expensive with payment licenses. Some people paying £3,000 or £4,000 every 6 months for payment licenses, plus onerous planning consent, etc. This new license does away with that. A license will be granted by the local authority. They can only charge up to £100 for the license, and the license will be valid for a minimum of 3 months. But the expectation is that licenses will be granted for 12 months or possibly up until the end of September 2021. We are hoping that this new regime will be adopted permanently in some form or another after September 21, but there's no plans in place yet. So we'll just have to see how that goes. But it does make total sense for payment licenses to be made a lot more simple and cheaper as well. The application process is a consultation period of 5 clear working days. If the application is not determined by then the license is deemed to be granted. So, if the council overrun by applications and they haven't actually processed it, then you automatically get that, and it will be for 12 months. The licensing authorities are able to set local conditions that cover the same matter as the national conditions. If you just Google payment licenses, you'll find the guidance online, which is a good read, and it gives them the national conditions. Local conditions will take precedence. So we have found over the last few days that a number of licensing authorities, local authorities, are putting quite a few conditions on the licenses. But they do have to be justifications for those conditions. You also have to display a notice for 5 days, and again, within your application, you should find a template for that or guidance for that on what needs to be displayed. There is no statutory appeal process. Which seems a bit odd, really. But again, we are hoping that licensing authorities will use the processes that are already in place, i.e. subcommittees, etc., subcommittee licensing committees. when designing your plans, you obviously have to submit plans, drawings to scale, etc., etc. You must consider requirements for disabled people, and you must also include a non-smoking area. So there's got to be a division. It doesn't have to be a physical barrier, but there has to be an area. It has to be 2 meters apart for smoking or non-smoking. That's it. So any questions? I'll get rid of my screen now.
Andy, thanks very much indeed for that. Just a quick one. You might guess from the accent, I'm based north of the border. There's a number of other people on the call this morning. And obviously we operate under a different licensing act and quite different regulations in many ways.
Absolutely.
To what extent are you aware of an alignment between the Scottish and the English Act in terms of what you've just been talking about?
Okay, yes, I should have said at the start of this is English and Wales, this is for. Scottish licensing, I'm not aware of the intentions as yet of Scottish licensing with respect to the pavements. I do expect them to follow suit, but I'm sure it will be different because it always is. I do work with Scottish licensing. We work very closely with solicitors there, Stephen McGowan at TLT. And I'm quite happy to find that out ready for the next presentation, if you like, and give you an update on Scottish licensing and what might be happening then. But at the moment, I say I'm not sure on that.
That would be really helpful if you could, Andy. The only thing I'm aware of north of the border is I am aware there's been an instruction from Scottish Government has gone to local authorities to say that they should look favourably in terms of any licensed premises wanting to expand or move into pavement areas, and certainly from one licensee that I know well, his experience is that speaking to Eastern Bartonshire Council, because here north of the border everything's under the local authorities, when he inquired about can I use the piece of grass outside, it was very simply the answer was yeah, go ahead. So it would seem to be as though that is working.
I think that's certainly the message that I'm hearing, is that the consensus is, or the encouragement is for a very light touch approach, as far as that's concerned. Now, whether all licensing boards take that stance is a different matter. Glasgow, as we all know, have a mind of their own.
Glasgow takes a very different viewpoint, yeah. And,
they do. And so all I would say is, look, is contact the licensing board. If you're in Scotland, contact the licensing board and ask the questions. I will certainly, on the next call, see if I can get an update for you with regards to Scottish licensing. And I may actually be able to get Steve McGowan or one of the guys to come on the call as well.
Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you. Anybody else got any questions on that? Well, moving swiftly on, Barry, if you'd like to give us a state of how the nation is doing.
Robin, thank you very much indeed. Good morning, everybody. Good to welcome many familiar faces back and to see a few new ones. If you're joining us for the first time, you're very, very welcome. Just going to run through a few things with our State of the Nation, and then a couple of generic points that I want to pick up on the end just to help and pass on a little bit of advice. If we start off south of the border, in the last 2 weeks since we previously met, certainly seen further relaxation of the social distancing rules and further relaxation of the lockdown. I'm aware, have been involved in some conversations with English-based businesses around possibility of reintroducing small events, small group gatherings, and been a number of discussions about we can now have up to 30 people, and that's both from the extent of the events side of the business, and things like face-to-face networking groups. Some of the networking that I'm involved with behind the scenes, there's let's describe it as active conversations about how can we actually get face-to-face meetings back up and running. And I'm aware of certainly some trial events being planned for the next 4 to 5 weeks. Alongside that, we've seen further activity within the local regionalised lockdown. Lockdown conditions remain fairly tight in the Leicester area, and the focus of attention somewhat has moved further north to the Blackburn area. I was hoping Tim Penta was going to be joining us this morning because he has some direct experience of the Leicester situation, but I don't think he's been able to join us. Moving north of the border, Scotland, we were having a bit of a chat. Some of you would have been part of before we started, that since 15th of July, most businesses in Scotland have had the opportunity to reopen their doors. I think it would be fair to say we have had a slightly more cautious, a slightly more relaxed approach to hospitality being reopened since the 15th of July. Certainly my own experience is that I'm in one of the satellite towns around Glasgow. Where I am, out in Lanarkshire, kind of feels like business as usual. I'd say most of the pubs are open, most of the cafes, restaurants that I've seen are open. It's a very different situation in the city centres. And certainly from my own experience, Glasgow city centre is still pretty much a ghost town. I've seen reports from the Scottish Licensed Trade Association saying that a third of licensed premises have chosen not to reopen since the 15th of July, largely because they feel that they can't implement even the 1 metre social distancing. Some positive news to share from north of the border. Yesterday, the Scottish Government announced a support package for the events industry, targeted at events venues themselves, but also at those in the supply chain. Any support is welcome news, I'm sure. We do need to put into context that the support fund that's been announced is £10 million. When you consider the events industry is estimated to be worth £6 billion annually across the UK, 10 million is not going to go very far. But for those of us who are north of the border, or those of you in England who have business interests in Scotland in the events industry, something worth having a look at. If you want to know more about that, have a look at my LinkedIn later today. There's a post going out this afternoon with more details about the Events Industry Support Fund. The other positive news from north of the border this year, which potentially could impact hoteliers across the UK, very pleased to say that Caledonian Travel is returning to the industry. Some of you will be familiar, Caledonian Travel was part of the Specialist Leisure Group, and went out of business in May along with Shearing's National Holidays. Some of the former exec team have acquired the Caledonian brand from the administrators and they're already up and running. Website's renewed, they've already got holidays on sale from their old inventory. So for those in coastal regions, those in the north of Scotland that may be operating in the leisure space, bit of positive news. So that's the Scottish situation. Wales, we now understand 3rd of August is the key date where businesses across in Wales have the opportunity to reopen. And then finally for our friends across in Ireland, I think if I maybe jump across to David Collins just for a second, just to get an update from the ground across the Irish Sea, David.
Thanks, Barry. Yes, good morning, everybody. I'm pleased to report that the upward trend in sales and inquiries is continuing. Really the only show in town at the moment here in Ireland is domestic short breaks, family holidays. This is a very important time of the year for the tourism industry in Ireland as far as it coincides with the Galway Race Week. It's also the start of 2 weeks of builders' holidays. So we've seen a significant surge in business. To give you figures, for example, versus the same period last month in June, our turnover in terms of holiday sales, general sales through our own company would be up 29%. So that's a very welcome trend. A couple of interesting things happened last week. The government introduced a couple of measures to try and help the tourism industry. For example, the extension of the temporary wage subsidy scheme
which will be extended through to the end of August, as well as the pandemic payment, which will be extended through to April 2021, albeit at a reduced level. And they've also introduced a low rate of VAT from 23% to 21%, which won't have an immediate impact on the tourism industry. Our VAT rate is 13.5%. There were calls to reduce that down to 0%, which was a bit of a Santa list, but nevertheless. The government has also introduced a staycation voucher, which I think is more of a cosmetic exercise than anything else, whereby if you are a single person, you will receive 125 euros of a autumn-winter break. If you're a couple, 250 euros off a break, up to a maximum value of 625 euros. Not terribly effective, very cumbersome scheme that they've introduced to support that. But the government is trying to show some sort of level of goodwill towards the industry, although a lot more is needed. We're all bracing ourselves for the end of August, start of September, which is when we expect a lot of hotels will probably close for the winter. The pubs have been delayed reopening. There's about 3,500 pubs in Ireland, and it's unfortunate. It's so far as a lot of these are small family businesses, and obviously have a major knock-on effect in terms of local suppliers. Whatever about the inconvenience to their customers, but the government is taking it quite seriously here, the potential impact of that, albeit it's causing a lot of disquiet, I can tell you. I put up a figure there just briefly earlier on the chat stream. I spoke to one of our guys in operations to ask, what is the cost impact of all these additional COVID measures? He advises me that between additional staffing, hygiene precautions, etc., as a percentage of overall net revenue to date, he's looking at an additional 3.1% cost. Now, I've asked, by the way, for a couple of other guys to sort of give me an idea, in particular, busier city centre hotels. So if by the end of this call I have those figures, I'll put them into the chat room.
David, thanks very much indeed. Thanks for that update. Last couple of things I just want to mention, which are more generic across the entire country. First of which is GDPR. Now, don't worry, I'm not gonna launch into any great lecture or rant about GDPR. I just want to pick up on a conversation we were having at the last forum of where businesses in England and definitely in Scotland have certain responsibilities under track and trace, or track and test, as we're calling it in Scotland. I've seen a number of conversations on social media, and also had a bit of experience firsthand. My experience firsthand was being handed a clipboard with a sheet of paper full of names, phone numbers, and email addresses in a local venue. Now, bless them, I could easily have gone into a bit of a talk and a lecture about GDPR compliance. I didn't, because frankly, it wasn't the fault of the waiting staff, the floor staff who were doing a very good job of looking after us last Friday. What I would say is, as venue operators, owners, there's 2 points I want to make here. You have got responsibilities to keep GDPR compliant with the track and trace, track and test system. I am aware of a lot of hoteliers, a lot of venue owners being approached, bombarded with app developers, IT developers, with very, very effective and very useful pieces of IT, but it come at quite a significant cost. And I think it's fair to say at the moment, I don't know anyone in the industry who's in purchasing mode at the moment. There are very effective, simple manual systems that can be put into place, but you need to have a thought about maintaining your GDPR compliance. A sheet of paper with a list of names, addresses, and email addresses and such is not GDPR compliant. Now, in the balance of all probabilities, are you likely to find yourself being prosecuted by the data processor? Probably not, and certainly there has been there's been comment publicly that they intend to take a very light hand in terms of GDPR compliance in the foreseeable future. particularly around the track and trace systems. That said, there's other things you can do to be able to handle your customers' personal details in a more secure way. I happen to be shown the prototype for a very effective book. If those of you of my age, if you remember the old-fashioned double copy message pads that we used to use in the industry, you wrote the customer's message on the top on an NCR style paper, and you handed a sealed message note to the customer. I saw a prototype of a very effective similar book for collecting track and trace data. I was just asked what did I think of it, and I actually thought really effective. And they were talking about a book of 1,000 slips going to market at less than £20 a book. If anyone's interested in that, drop me a wee note. No personal interest whatsoever, but I can put you in touch with the people that were producing that. The real point I want to make about GDPR is, those of you who are at operations, the last thing you need right now are customer complaints or official problems because your data collection process isn't GDPR compliant. You just don't need it. So I would encourage a little bit of thought at the moment into that process to just save yourself a lot of pain and headache a little bit further down the road. Second thing I want to mention, in the UK, the Eat Out to Help Out scheme goes live next week from the 3rd of August. I've seen some interesting debate on social media about the Eat Out to Help Out scheme. So a really interesting post a few days ago, a restaurant owner in the Southwest complaining that the last thing we need is a discount scheme at this point in time. August is my peak trading period. Let's just remember the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, the UK government is going to reimburse the £10 per head discount that you give to your clients. I've had a look through the process, and their commitment is to reimburse you those £10 discounts within 5 days of you having processed through the website. It might just help you to get a bit more footfall through your door at the moment, and it's not actually going to cost you as the operator anything other than a wee bit of time to set it up. So if you've been thinking negatively about the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, maybe encourage you just to revisit it. It might not do you any harm and might just get a few extra people through the door without actually costing you anything. Final thing that I want to mention is that I'm certainly aware of a lot of properties, particularly in Scotland, who are going to market at the moment through deal sites. I'm getting bombarded on a daily basis, whether it's Groupon, Voucher, It Is On, any of these kind of deal site properties. And I just want to voice a little word of caution. I completely understand your doors have been closed for 4 months. You want to get business back on the books. I completely understand that people would be tempted to use the deal site route to try and build some occupancy. I would just urge a little bit of caution. In my operations days, I've used deal sites very strategically, and that's what I would encourage you to do. If you do want to go down the deal site road, please look at it as being a strategic means of getting a little bit of base business in. I encourage you not to get yourself into a situation where your full bedroom inventory or your full restaurant table inventory is being taken up by deal sites. It'll give you volume, but the counter is it won't necessarily give you margin. I've had a lot of experience of using deal sites. If you want to have a chat just to how to use it more strategically to get you a little bit of base in there, David Collins is also very experienced in this field. I'm certainly happy to have a phone call with everybody. I'm sure DC would happily take a phone call or have an email chat as well. But I'm just urging a little bit of caution there, because the deal sites will happily take all your inventory off you. You don't necessarily want to be doing that. So that's a quick state of the nations. Thanks for your attention, folks. And Robin, back to you.
Thank you very much, Barry, and thank you for everybody who helped there. I would add, I saw an app which they're actually doing free of charge for actually logging the people coming into your establishment. I'll try and get the details and pop it into the summary when I send it out later today. They're also, yeah, the Eat Out is not a discount. It's basically the government paying £10 off a guest's bill, which means you do have to declare the VAT. So bear that in mind when you're working out how you're going to process that deal. You can get the money off the government, so it's not a discount. It's just charging them part of it. But you do have to declare the VAT on that part of the sale as well. So bear that in mind. Moving quickly on now, we've got Julie Tate with her take on recovery and where we can go in those situations.
Okay, Robin, do you have my slides, or will I try and
You should be able to share it because I've
share? Let me see. That's perfect.
I've worked out how.
Let me see if I can share my screen. I think it's this one.
Looks like it.
Does that look okay?
Yep.
Okay, let me just fix this on this side. Right, okay. So as Robin said, my name is Julie Tate and I'm from Grant Thornton. I guess I'm a director in the restructuring team. And I'm also an insolvency practitioner. So I have promised to try and keep it upbeat and hopefully just give a little bit of information that I guess hopefully might be helpful, or that you've come across, you know, when you've been dealing with the pandemic, I guess. So the first slide really is just in relation to the impact of, I guess, COVID-19. You'll all be aware how it's affected the economy. It's in March had the biggest fall. There's been a lot of information and government schemes put in, employment, the claims for the unemployment related benefits surged. There's I suppose in the service sector, the hotels and hospitality has been among the most significantly impacted, which is what we have found. At the time, 89% of hospitality businesses were forced to operate at significantly reduced level or close entirely. International tourist arrivals, they're estimating will be down by 59%. And overall, it's expected to result in an approximately 1/3 decline in trade for 2020 for the industry. And I guess many businesses face even more significant financial challenges now that trading can recommence than maybe they experienced while they were in lockdown or hibernation. So in relation to then just sort of moving on, sorry, I just flick this over. So the outlook, I guess, that we're seeing at the moment is some positive signs that consumer confidence is beginning to return, and it's helped by the gradual lifting, I guess, of the lockdown restrictions and the reopening of the non-essential retail businesses, although things are beginning to open again. And the booking frenzy, I guess, that we're seeing when we're speaking to people is that, yes, holidays in the UK, 2020 is the year for the great staycation, with demand for the smaller self-catering accommodation. The camping sites and self-catering accommodation providers are saying that more or less overnight, when restrictions were lifted, that they are getting busier. But foreign travel is still restricted. So this is obviously where people would normally go away. I guess some people are beginning to go away in July, and I know Robin said he was away. A lot of people maybe are choosing not to, and this is obviously helping with the staycations in the UK. The pattern of recovery that we're seeing, sorry, just flicked on, was provided to us by Colliers. So I guess it's really just from what I've been hearing, I guess, on this and other sites, the stronger performance are the traditional destinations, the country and coastal, the budget hotels, service departments, and some of the branded hotels, and the weaker performance, traditional business, upscale, meetings, conferences, university, and city hotels, which seem to be we seem to be in line, I think, with the numbers that we're seeing and coming in. And I guess I was on a call last week, and Mark Cawthall, the Chief Exec of the Scottish Trust, advised that for July and August, that 35% occupancy was for country and coastline. And for the city hotels, it was only between 8 and 9%, which is probably in line with what was being said earlier, that the cities are suffering. And probably in line with the attractions are not being open yet. So like Edinburgh Castle, the museums, etc., are all contributing to the lack, I guess, of people visiting the cities. And that is causing a bit of an issue for numbers in this scenario. So what do we look at, I guess, when we are planning for recovery? So our big focus when people come to speak to us, because I guess I speak to directors, I speak to shareholders, I speak to financial managers, credit managers, people just who want a conversation about their business, how things are going, and what could we do to help them, or are they just putting in the right measures? So cash flow, I guess, is what we're looking at. So when we're planning for the recovery, the accurate forecasts play a critical role in guiding, I guess, your purchasing, your staffing levels, your sales, your revenue strategy, cost control, your cash flow, general management. And I guess in the coming weeks and months, the financial predictions will be used to inform critical decisions about your business, such as when to reopen, and if you are open, how quickly to scale up or whether to scale back, and how to prioritize supplier payments. So when forecasts, I guess, are inaccurate, it prevents the business, I guess, from operating at its best. And if the business might struggle to protect the asset value and preserve the time and the revenues to start flowing again. So we would always say it's really, really important to get your cash flow right and your cash flow strategy. And normally we would say, you know, month to month, but actually when we've been helping people and speaking to directors, we've been saying do it week to week. And the supply chain was mentioned earlier, and that's another big contributor, the suppliers that are supplying the business. So that tends to play a big part in the cash flow as well. So then the route, I guess, to recovery, these are all the things that we look at with businesses. So what will the pattern of recovery look like? What is your customer base? What's the historical data you have? What is your exposure to the business travel? I suppose, was it mainly meetings, conferences, events that you did? Are we able to break down your customer base and see, was it mainly international visitors or project recoveries, or consider how much of your customer base has been compromised as a result of this, and to think about how a rapid recovery in the market might provide some of this loss. What does your sales cycle look like? So for effective cash flow forecasting, to understand how quickly cash can come into the business, what return will you make, where booking is made directly, or is it a third-party booking, and greater visibility, I guess, over the area and your bookings, which I know was mentioned as well, I guess, by Barry earlier, just in relation to that. So we're also look at the operating cost base, the protocols in place. Are we would you be operating, I guess, table services, staff costs, and then decisions, I guess, in relation to the facilities of the business. Do you move room to room? Is it catering only? Is it staff helping out? Is it exceptional costs, or are there other costs that you need to quantify and be as accurate as possible, and consider the ways in which I suppose they can be mitigated post the lockdown pressures on your cash situation? So that's all your operating costs, I guess, are quite important, which you'll all be aware of. Then in relation to, we would also look at landlord negotiations, how maybe the situation is. We've seen differences between businesses and landlords in recent months, and how the business can protect themselves and how they can speak to the landlord, and how the landlords are protecting themselves, what the communication is, if there's negotiations ongoing, what are the likely outcomes of the negotiations, what are the outcomes of the conversations, and how these are affecting your cash flow, and whether they're affecting your cash flow in the short term or whether long term, or is it multi-site, the landlords, you know, are you one of many, or are you just one? And is it easy for you to negotiate something with them? We've seen landlords, I guess, in like the retail industry, moving to turnover rents. I don't know if anybody has had issues with, you know, negotiations, etc. And then what is the impact, I guess, of payment plans and deferrals? So have you been able to negotiate them during the initial onset of the crisis? Are you able to revisit them? The context of the trade resuming, the assets, is it still appropriate to have them? Or is further engagement maybe needed with the creditors in relation to this, just to give you a chance to get your business up and running again? What, I guess, impact is the government support having? So the VAT deferrals, has your VAT been deferred, and is it due to be paid next year? Has that been put into your business plan? Are you paying your VAT just now with this VAT to be paid down the road? Have you built that in? Are the government, I guess, the time to pay arrangements, if anybody has reached that with HMRC, which may or may not always be the right decision for a company, just depending on what's happening. Are they being kept to? Are negotiations happening? And I guess just in relation to the winding up of the CJRS scheme with, I suppose, with staff being furloughed, it's always important to have a look at this. I guess if any of your staff are furloughed, how, what impact is it going to have when the companies have to start contributing to these costs going forward? Just to get an overall picture, I guess, and to bear in mind that these will all have, I guess, an impact going forward, and it's how you can deal with them, I guess, will help. So then in relation to reopening and scaling up considerations, when we've spoken to people, they said, well, you know, how can you help us? What should we be looking at? So again, I guess when you're adhering to the social distancing and the new hygiene protocols, it'll be very different, and your targets will be different, and occupancy levels and leases, this will all be something that needs to be considered, and we'll obviously be presenting challenges to everybody in lots of industries. So I suppose the pricing strategy will be really, really important, and significant demand, depending on where you are, and comparable hotel prices, pricing levels, again, might need to be adjusted to optimize room occupancy. And I guess earlier, Barry again was saying, just be careful, I guess, how you are pricing strategy, because sometimes short-term gain mightn't always help in the long term. So it's just important to take that into consideration. Marketing strategy, budgets, I guess, may have been cut, but to consider how the best marketing spend can be used, how you can target your customers, communicating new protocols to the customers, emphasizing the changes that have been made to your operating procedures in regards to the hygiene and the social distancing, to help reassure the potential guests that their health is considered important, their stay will be as safe as possible, Selective reopening, I guess you'll be looking at focusing your efforts. Are you reopening rooms, or are you opening restaurants? Is it the leisure facilities or the golf clubs, and what goes along with that to help kickstart the business and get the revenue in? And then the technological solutions. So again, what check-in systems, an arrival, what will that cost? What does that mean? Can we use a WhatsApp method? What can you do for the guests to benefit from the quality, but also helping your own business? So other financial considerations then, just as a reminder that we would look at, I guess, as part of our analysis is the cash flow. Again, just re-looking at that. That's a constant for any business. Flexible rostering, claims that are coming in, just to cautiously maybe reinstate direct debits if they've been cancelled, retaining annual payments, which may be beneficial to oversight of cash movements. And just taking our time just to have a look at what we need to consider on an overall, I guess, basis. So these are all the things, I guess, that we look at and help. So then when businesses come and they say, I guess, well, where can you help? This is what we're looking at. These are the signs, I guess, that we're asking people. So in distress situations, I guess your working capital liquidity, your cash flow forecasts, again, mitigating your actions, payment deferrals, stakeholder support. Are your stakeholders supporting you? Are you able to inject additional capital in, provide funding? Are creditors no longer willing to continue supplying the business, or are they supporting the business? Financial performance, occupancy, and booking levels to cover your fixed costs, your loss of your key revenue stream, say for meetings, events, your market sector changes. Large hotel chains, I guess, might be able to be more attractive, competitors seeking maybe to undercut, or whether everybody's maybe sticking to the same prices and the elements of the guest experience. Reduce capex. Is there any way, insufficient levels of investment to maintain the attractive guest experience? Is there any unplanned expenditure on repairs and maintenance presenting an increased cost pressure? Employee issues, matching your staffing levels to uncertain levels of trading activity, redundancy costs, are they going to place an additional cost pressure on the business, I guess? If this is something that you need to consider. And I guess then where structuring advisors can help is just the short-term cash flow, identifying and addressing the pinch points maybe in a business to quantify the magnitude and timing of shortfalls. Forecasting challenges, timing, I guess, is critical. And if we can see any, I guess, cash short flow coming, just to kind of stress test these pinch points to help the business. Negotiations with creditors is another thing that we can suggest. And I guess companies haven't, they've faced it before, but maybe it's a bigger challenge now, and managing it can be an impossible task at times. Alternative sources of financing, if businesses need some information or a bit of help, or to speak to people that might be able to provide an alternative source of finance that they might not have considered, or the support and ranges, maybe packages offered by the government or other public bodies. If we're aware of anything, maybe that's the Scottish Government are offering. Developing a turnaround plan. So we're experienced in, I guess, helping struggling businesses, setting the business on a path to recovery, and seeking the buy-in of the key stakeholders for the process. Contingency planning is just, I guess, where there's a risk of a formal insolvency. If it is unavoidable, we can develop a plan for how this can be executed and controlled, minimizing the impact on the business and protecting value for creditors and shareholders. So what makes a successful turnaround? And this is obviously very high level. It's just every part of this needs to be, I guess, explored. This is just a brief little diagram, which would lead, you know, we obviously have to go into much more detail when we're looking at a business, but we look to stabilize the situation, establish a turnaround strategy. What are the key drivers? What's the value in the business? The areas where improvements may be made. Identify, speak to the key people, because there will be key people that will know what's happening with the business, what changes are required, and speaking to these people is of paramount importance. Obtaining stakeholder commitment, so to keep a business running, it needs the support from the creditors and the supply chains, and providing creditors, I suppose, a visibility over the turnaround plan and reassurance that there is a turnaround in place, so that you keep the support and monitor, I guess, and oversight. And then I guess we tend to focus again on the good management information, the operational and performance, the corporate governance and management that the business is tied into, and you'll be sick of me saying it now, liquidity and the cash management. It comes down to that. So if, I guess, we've gone through all the options of what are we seeing in the marketplace at the minute, what formal insolvencies are there to help businesses? So we have seen some CVAs. There's been an increase in that, in CVAs, which are like an arrangement between the company and its creditors, and a legally binding agreement. We've also seen the new moratorium come in. So this came in under the new Corporate Insolvency and Government Act 2020. It was the biggest change in almost 20 years in insolvency, and it's an attempt to mitigate the enormous economic damage caused by COVID. So the aim of this act and the moratorium, I don't know if anybody has come across it before, is to offer companies that are struggling a lifeline through a moratorium and through the implementation of the bill. And there's different rules and guidelines that go along with it. And then we have an administration which is aimed at giving the company a breathing space to return to the financial health, and see if there is a return possible. And if not, then how do you advantageously realize the assets of the company? But these are just all different procedures that we can help out with and do. I'm not going to go into each one individually. This is just a really, I guess, high level of what we look at, how we can help and support businesses. And I don't know, from past experience, I guess, from an insolvency practitioner, is I find sometimes people are afraid to phone us or maybe call us because they feel that might be the end of their company. But I guess in order for us to help and to help sufficiently and turn around a business, I guess the easier it is, the earlier you call is probably always better, because there's more a chance, I guess, of, we'll have come across lots of different scenarios, I guess, and lots of different businesses. So the easier, I guess, the earlier you call, the easier it is for us to help and assist, where sometimes it is quite hard, because we do get a call maybe 2 or 3 days and people will say to us, well, actually our cash is running out tomorrow, or our cash is running out in 2 days. How can you help? What can you do? And it's that then where it is quite tricky and difficult to turn around the business. So I did tell Robin I wouldn't go on, go on and on. So it's just, I am conscious it's a very, very high level and a very, very quick summary kind of what we can do, what, I guess, how we can help, or what we have looked at and how we have helped people, I guess, so far. So that is generally it, really. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take any questions, or if anybody wants to have, I don't know, a deeper dive into any aspect, or if anyone's worried about anything, I'm happy to have a call at any point. Always happy to have a chat.
Thank you, Juliet. Anybody have any questions?
Not so much a question, Robin, but I would just reinforce what Julie said there, that the sooner anybody seeks help, whether it's from somebody like myself who's been involved in a lot of commercial turnarounds, or if it's Julie in terms of actually looking at how you can restructure, refinance your business, the sooner you start having those conversations, the better, and the greater the opportunity to actually resolve things in a positive way. One of my biggest frustrations is the number of times people come to me and ask for operational or strategic help, and if only they'd asked me 3 months, 6 months sooner, would have had a better chance of being able to resolve things. So really just to support and endorse what you said there, Julie.
Thank you.
I would just like to sort of concur with Barry and certainly Julie. You know, you hit the nail on the head with a lot of the aspects of the industry, hospitality and hotel industries facing. But really, just to emphasise, you know, how closely you need to monitor your KPIs, your RevPAR, long-term cash flow as well. Very, very important as the short term. I mean, some people are forecasting the fact that we could be heading for a bit of a train crash beginning of next year, when you know, the VAT and PAYE, etc., it's all being deferred, needs to be paid. So really critical to keep a very close eye on your cash flow, and flexibility again in your workforce and the way you work. Just keep it constantly under review. A couple of things, just again with my licensing head on. If any of you are unfortunate to end up in an insolvency situation, just as a quick reminder, your premises licenses will lapse on entering insolvency. This being a CVA or administration, not a moratorium. So if you go into a moratorium, then your license doesn't lapse, but it will lapse on going into a CVA or administration. Your license can be reinstated very quickly by a transfer application or an interim authority. So it's just something to warn people. We're hearing quite a few businesses that are going into CVAs and administration, and the licenses aren't being transferred, and all of a sudden you don't have a license.
Anybody else have anything to comment on there?
Robin, can I just pose a quick question? It's Julian T. Sorry, quick question to Andy. Andy, just on that comment there, if that insolvency position happens, is there not a period of 28 days in which that license from the lapsing of the license effectively, have you got 28 days where you can still trade whilst you have an application in process, so you don't have to cease trading?
In England and Wales, no. The license will lapse as soon as effectively the hammer goes down in court. So as soon as the appointment is made, whether it be a CVA or administration, the license will lapse. You have 28 days to reinstate the license, but licensable activity cannot commence until the license is reinstated. Okay, so but after the 28-day period, the license is lost completely, and you'd have to make a new application.
Right.
Is that clear? I mean, basically it's lost as soon as the appointment. Sorry, it lapses as soon as the appointment is made. So to start licensable activity again, you need to reinstate it with a transfer or a interim authority. Most licensing authorities are doing those online now. You know, we're doing. We do loads of them, and we hold the licenses as well for insolvency practitioners. And we, you know, literally the phone can go, they'll send through the appointment documents, and we'll have the transfer done in a matter of hours, couple of hours. As soon as the application is made, you don't have to wait for it to be processed. It takes immediate effect.
It's about getting that application made, so at least you can carry on as best you can.
Absolutely, yes. So as soon as something like that happens, an appointment is made, then
I think
a company like
yeah.
ourselves can make the application to transfer the license, and then you just carry on.
I think,
Thanks
Andy,
Andy.
you'd have a plan in place, wouldn't you? Because if you knew a company was going, if there was going to be an insolvency, prior to that, you'd have plans. So if it was going to court or going in somewhere, you'd have your application ready.
Ideally, yes, you would.
Yeah.
But there are many situations where it does
Yeah,
get
where they may
overlooked.
not. Yeah.
Absolutely, and it's really just a sort of a warning, because we're dealing with a hotel at the moment where it's a 200-bed hotel, and their license is lost. It was held within the holding company. The holding company went into administration or liquidation. I can't remember which one it was. And then the freehold company didn't transfer the license. That then also went into administration, and now the hotel can't trade for another 28 days. We are going to use temporary event notices and things like that to get them up and running, but the cost, you don't want the cost, you don't want these problems when they're very, it's avoidable.
Yeah, just if I can say to Julie, just commenting from Dublin, one of the first slides was saying that the coastal hotel or countryside are actually dealing much better with the current situation. Yeah, I completely agree. In Dublin, my property is pretty much affected by the lack of business travel. And the fact that there are no events, no concert, no theater, no nothing. But then I had a different question at the very beginning, because I didn't really get the point of the government in Ireland, and I think also in UK, regarding the difference on serving drink and food on the table. I didn't actually get it at all. The fact that we are allowing to have guests drinking and eating in the pub instead of just sitting and only drink. That was something that I didn't get.
Yeah, I don't know why Ireland have brought that in, to be honest. Maybe David knows from a hospitality point of view why in Ireland you have to have food in every pub with a drink with alcohol.
It's linked to the fact that restaurants were slated to open earlier than pubs, and so publicans decided that, whereas they wouldn't have heretofore, they decided that they'd start serving food.
Yeah, but what now at this point? I mean, today, for instance. I mean, now I know that the next timeline is the 10th of August, if I remember well.
Yeah.
When this will be reviewed. For,
yeah. Now, having said that, I mean, the anecdotal evidence, in fact, the personal experience that I've had is you can order, for example, a pint if you have a substantial meal. A lot of people would, for example, claim a table and sit in a pub for a number of hours, having just ordered a soup and a sandwich, and other people will have joined them, and for the sake of complying with the law, or be seen to be complying with the law, the menus would be left on the table in case the boys in blue called. And they have done. And on last count, there was about 26 pubs in Ireland who have been sanctioned because of the fact that obviously sold drink and not sold food at the same time. I think, though, that it's, again, it's an unfortunate situation, because, if you look at the practicalities of it, a lot of pubs just simply can't operate food. If you look at the hygiene aspects of it, I don't think COVID distinguishes between people who eat food and people who don't eat food.
Exactly. So I completely understand the fact that if you have a small space that you cannot guarantee the space, fair enough. But once you have a space, I mean, in my organization we have a big gastropub. So now for guests staying in the hotel, we are adopting a slightly different approach. But for walk-in to the gastropub, where we have all the social distance in place, where we only serve the guests when they are sitting on the table. So at that point, what's the difference if a guest asks me steak together with a pint or wine compared to people that have had maybe dinner next door and then coming to me just for a whiskey or something, and then I cannot do that.
Well, the fact is that, I mean, again, it's full of ironies and contradictions. I think what we've seen here in Ireland is that the politicians have taken over the direction of health policy as distinct from the clinicians or virologists. And if it was the latter, I don't think pubs and restaurants would be allowed to open.
But they have to do it, of course, taking into consideration the opinion of the specialists, like doctors, etc. But of course, has to be the politician that have to say, they have to give the guidelines. I guess.
Anyway, yeah. Thank you for that. Has anybody else got any comments? I'm aware that we're losing people, so I've spoke to Steve and agreed that we'll put Steve's slot in as the presentation for next session, which will be in 2 weeks' time, just so that we get a good coverage on it.
Well, Robin, I'm actually away that week.
Okay, so we'll do it for the next one, yeah?
All right.
That way we get a good coverage on it. I've noticed the chat about the vouchers. My take on the vouchers is that if you sell room only and they then buy breakfast or buy dinner, then they can use the vouchers. Is that what you tend to agree with? Is Mark still there? Or have we lost Mark now?
Mark's gone, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, he's gone now. But
from my reading of the regs, Robin, I would agree with you there. It's specifically excluded for anything that's packaged. So a B&B or a DBB deal, or if you've got those who are doing, and I know there are some small scale conferences going on south of the border, if you've got a meeting with lunch or such, that is specifically excluded. But if it's a genuine retail sale of food in the lounge and the bar, I would think items like a retail sale full price breakfast, that I don't see that it should be an issue with that.
Okay, good. Right. Has anybody else got anything else they'd like to chip in before we sort of call it a day for today? No?
Just to say again to yourself, Robin and Barry, thanks very much for organising this. I think it's very useful. It would be good to get perhaps a view from folks as to how their businesses are beginning to fare going forward. You know, we're coming to the end of August. I think everybody's looking at September. So maybe a straw poll, maybe for the next one, to see how business is pacing. Just generally speaking, I think both for obviously the Irish as well as the UK contingent.
Yeah, I could see if I can get something out in this week, ready for the next one. That'd be good. Okay, I think we can call it a day for today. Thank you again very much for all attending, and we'll come together again in 2 weeks' time.
Thanks. Enjoy the day, everyone.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Bye. Bye.
Thanks for coming along, everyone. Good to see you all, and keep busy.
Right.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah.
See you soon, Kevin.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, nearly last to leave. See you later, Robin.
Yeah.
I'll give you a ring because I was really interested in it. It was a fantastic presentation from Grant Thornton. I mean, people could just lift that and get on with their work. You know, that's superb.
Yeah.
How's things with you?
I'm fine. Carrying on as usual.
Are you picking up any business?
Not so much yet, but I'm getting quite a few leads coming. So
Right. Okay.
yeah, it's So
remember, if you do anything and you want, I mean, I've been doing it along, but if you want anything reposted, and I'll tag you in it as well, just to, because I've got quite a sizable hospitality. I've got about 10,000 people on LinkedIn, but I reckon 7,000 of them are in hospitality. So if you want anything like that ever, just ping me a note to say you've posted it, and I'll pick it up, comment on it, and tag you so that you'll see any likes and comments, which is always useful to sort of pick up stuff, I think, off that.
I'll bear that in mind, Kevin.
Yeah, I'm going to, well, I don't know if you've got time now, but I've got, I'll ring you. I've found a very interesting angle on commercial utilities, somebody that's doing smart stuff. They're not interested in just a straight, you know, how much is it per kilowatt hour. They do a proper investigation, see if they can help you with solar panels, but they'll fund it, and they'll fund it with you. And if you need anything, there's some capital money there as well. So it's a very refreshing, very new way of doing things. An example up here is they did a fish factory, bought the guy his freezers and his refrigeration stuff, and still, because they were able to reduce his electricity by so much, they were able to charge it back through the next electricity period. And he's paying less, but at the end of the period he'll own the stuff. So it's a completely win-win. It's got a bit of European stuff behind it. So
if you can give me a call about 2 o'clock or 2 or 3 o'clock, we'll have a chat about that.
No bother.
I'll close off for now.
Okay, cheers then. Thanks for
See
that.
you. Bye.
Right.
Bye.